That's the way to live, right there in that little phrase. Loving God and giving kindness, giving charity to everyone in our world. That's the way to live. So, how do we penetrate to that heart's intuition? Prayer and meditation. That's how we arrive at true understanding. And why do we do all this? Why do we study the scriptures? Why do we care about going deeply into the teachings? Because we want to escape suffering. That's the whole point of it. I had a very unusual experience. This was many years ago. I was driving in a car with Swami Kriyananda. I was sitting in the back seat and he was sitting in front of me in the passenger seat. We were both looking out the window. And there was a busy city street scene going on out there, like a million of them that you've gone by every day of your lives. But this one was very strange. And I couldn't understand what was happening. I think there was some heightened awareness or something different. Maybe Swami was giving me this experience. I don't know. But the people were obviously suffering. Usually you walk by people and they just have an indifferent poker face on and you can't see anything. But these people, you could see pain and fear and suffering and sadness. Just blatant. It was for me to read in every person walking down the street. It was so bizarre that I said, "Swami, are you seeing this?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Why is this happening?" And he said, "These people were born to suffer. These people were born to suffer." So we have this interesting passage of Jesus saying, it's not what goes into a person's mouth that makes them unclean and common. It's what comes out of their mouth. And further, then this quote isn't in this passage today, but Jesus goes on to explain to his disciples when they ask him what this means. He said, evil springs from the heart and from the mind. And that evil is what makes the body unclean. And he lists them. He lists some of them. There's many. But he said the thoughts of murder and lust and perjury and theft and blasphemy, all those sorts of evil thoughts. And we could continue with anger and hatred and jealousy. In today's parlance, we would call them negative emotions. And science very accommodatingly tells us that they are toxic to the body. And here's Jesus telling us the same thing 2,000 years ago. That evil, those negative emotions, make the body unclean, make the body toxic. We have to free ourselves from that. We have to become purified. And again, what is he saying to do? Refer everything to God, everything to our love for God. Become more devoted to God. Anything you can do to bring in higher consciousness. Even if you don't want to call it God and have the Western idea of an old man sitting in an antiseptic corner of space, as Swami would say, wreaking judgment on people. Think of it as your own highest potential, as the greatest joy, the perfection that we seek, that divine love, that divine peace. That list of murder, lust, perjury that Jesus refers to reminds me of a story that Swami used to tell of reading a headline in his college newspaper when he was a young man. And this headline in bold letters said, "Murder, lust, mayhem." And then in the fine print of the article it said, "Now that we have your attention, there will be a meeting of the French Club on Tuesday." People love drama. We love drama, don't we? But there's a certain point where we tire of the drama and we want Dharma. We want peace. We don't want the ups and downs, the constant roller coaster of negative emotions. And it's interesting that Jesus says it's what comes out of a man's mouth that makes him unclean. Because it's not just harboring negative emotions, negativity, but then when we speak from that state of consciousness, what does it do? It perpetuates it. It perpetuates that pain. Because karma, what is karma? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what we put out, we get back. We are doing all these things to ourselves. When we speak unkindly to others, it's going to come back to us. It's just the law. Sometimes I say, God, I don't think it's a good law. I think it's a bad law. I don't like it. I think there's too much suffering in the world. It's too painful. Why did you do it this way? And I just feel like God says, I know. But you know what? It works. Suffering works. It guides people. It guides people to the right action. I read a beautiful thing that Swami said. He said, suffering from karma gives us the discipline to want to live in the right way. It gives us the energy to live rightly, to think in the right way, to change ourselves. Otherwise, we would never bother. We would just get comfortable and more negative, and who cares? But this way, we want to change. We don't want to suffer like those little people that I saw on the street that day. Divine Mother just showed me that sort of behind the faces, the poker face that we put on for the world, showed me what people really feel. And there's so much pain out there. Whatever we can do to, instead of speaking criticism and anger and blasphemy, if we can instead give kindness with every word, we will be doing a great thing in this world. There's so much, I think you can fill in the blank. There's so much non-adherence to virtue, shall we say, not right action. The idea of the truth is slandered. People don't care about the truth. But the interesting thing is that the law of karma is still working, whether you believe in it or not. So if we can act in the right way, we will be doing this world a favor. We will be helping the cause of righteousness. And we will come to know, as Jesus tells us here, that we will know the truth, and the truth will make us free. God bless you.
In this passage, the fundamentalists, the orthodox religionists, as Swamiji puts it, don't show up in a real great light. Jesus gives them a pretty good talking to. And I was reflecting that it's very easy in this world to point a finger at someone, whether it's politically or whether it's socially or whether it's spiritually in terms of religion. It's very, very easy in this world to say, I'm right, therefore you're wrong, therefore wake up. And that approach just doesn't, or alternatively, the alternative might be, oh, well, if you're right, then that must mean I'm wrong. Ooh, that's not a very comfortable place to be. And we have to learn to see, and this is what Christ is trying to tell us, what the reading and the explanation are trying to tell us. Devotion sees right to the heart of the matter. Devotion sees right straight to the truth. And maybe more importantly, devotion gives us the sense that I'm going to do something about this also. I'm actually going to commit myself to following the path that leads to that truth. I'm not just going to leave it out there off in the distance, but I'm going to follow it to its natural conclusion. The other thing that this awareness brings us is that fundamentalism as a concept is valid in its own context, because the people who embrace it need that level of fixity in their life. When your life is sort of wildly out of control and you find some basic principles that say, live this way and it will be okay, it will get better, trust me, just do it and trust me. We go, oh, okay, if we're at that level, it's like you hang on to it, and it becomes a very, I would describe it as white knuckles around the steering wheel of life. This iron grip of it's got to be this way and nothing else will do. And if somebody else comes along and says, well, there's a higher way, it's like, I don't want to hear about any higher ways. I've got my way and I'm hanging on to it, and nobody's going to peel my fingers off that steering wheel. I'm going to stick to it. Okay, well, at that time, that's the appropriate level. Fundamentalism is sort of, you might say in this regard, fundamentalism is rooted in nature, because it's also in ourselves. We also have that level in ourselves where if things are completely out of control, we go back to basics. We go back to the fundamental truths of our own experience, particularly, or maybe we have to get it from outside somewhere. Maybe life corrects us, as Nirmala was pointing out. When we suffer enough, we sort of, open our eyes a little bit and go, what is happening, and why is this happening, and what can I do about this so that it doesn't keep happening? Okay, and then we get on the bus and we get to the school of life and we start following the lesson plan there. But Christ in this reading is saying there are higher levels, there are higher octaves to this. And chief among them is devotion, as the affirmation today went. And without it, we can't get anywhere. And devotion teaches us through our own experience what to pay attention to in this world. If you think of a city street, say like what Nirmala was describing, you're driving down a city street, you see buildings, you see people, you see telephone poles, you see whatever it is. What do you actually see? You see what you focus on. You see what you are attuned to see. And this is where it gets a little bit stunning. Physics tells us you create the world according to what you see. You actually create the world. There is no objective world out there. I know that just sounds completely bizarre. I remember writing a paper in college about the ultimate subjective reality, and I didn't get a real great grade on it because it wasn't entirely on topic, but it was really meaningful to me at any rate. But it's just struck me that, we focus on so many different things. I mean, one person is looking at the buildings, another person is looking at the street and whether there are potholes in it. Somebody else is looking at the sky. Somebody else is observing the people and whatever expressions they have on their face. And somebody else is wondering, why don't I have a cell phone signal so that I can pick up the score to the Duke basketball game that's happening right now? All of us find a level that we're comfortable with, and we draw from that level. We draw from that level the experiences that help us to take the next step in life. That next step may be a big, tall step. It may be 1 inch. It may be whatever we're sort of ready for. But that next step is waiting for every single one of us, and devotion helps us to take that step. I remember learning long ago from my own experience, but earlier from watching other people, a simple truth. The truth was, responsibility is something that no one can give to you if you are not ready and willing to receive it. And once you take it, no one can take it away from you unless you are willing and able and ready to relinquish it. Well, the same might be said for devotion. Devotion cannot be given to you because you have to want it. You have to sort of earn it. It's almost like a kind of spiritual currency that applies to all levels of life. But making a material analogy for it diminishes it, so that's not entirely appropriate. But if you think of, what is it? Suffering alone is not enough to bring us devotion. There comes a point where we stop. Suffering can get us to stop. Reminds me of the cute little phrase, what is the first law of holes? If you find yourself in one, stop digging. Well, in life, suffering can get us to stop. So, sometimes we run up against a situation and it's so shocking or it's so sudden or it's so whatever that we just stop and we'll turn and look and try to understand. Okay, so that's what suffering's job has done. But the opening of the heart aspect, that has to come from inside. We have to be willing to trust life enough, to trust the path that's in front of us enough to open our hearts and say, I know there's something more here. I know there's a truth that I have not yet fully experienced. What is it and how can I find that? And devotion shows us the way to take those steps. And the path, in a sense, is universal, and in another sense, the path is unique. I was going to say absolutely unique or perfectly unique, but of course in the English language, technically you're not supposed to qualify the word unique. Went back and forth with Swami on that one time. It was an interesting discussion, but anyway, your path is unique. Your path is uniquely your own path. No one else can walk it for you, but you can draw from the experience of others who have gone before, and you can learn from them. Even if you don't walk the same path that they walked, you can walk with the spirit that they walked, or you can walk with the energy and the joy, because that inspires us. And this is one of the reasons that we read the lives of the saints and the masters, because there is this vigor to it. There's a a lovely story of a saint who wrote one of the chants that we sing occasionally here. It's a very, very energetic chant, Swami Ram Tirtha's chant. And, it's kind of shocking when you first hear it. If you've never heard it before, none can atone me, say, who would injure me? The world turns aside to make room for me. I come, O blazing light, the shadows must flee. Hail, O ye oceans, divide up and part, or parched up and scorched up, be dried up, depart. I mean, it's like, whoa, who is this guy? And he turns out he's this humble little math teacher from India. I mean, it's like, wait a minute. Oh, obviously, he had a pretty divine experience. There's 3 more verses, by the way, after that, which I won't go into. I hitched to my chariot the fates and the gods. I mean, it's like, wow, this is pretty vigorous. This is superhero kind of stuff we're talking about. He was on a ship to San Francisco from the Orient. This is about 1900, give or take. And some American man came up to him and started asking him questions because he was curious. There's this Indian Swami who, didn't seem to have any friends, didn't seem to have any contacts, didn't seem to really have much of anything around him. And so he asked the man, do you have any friends? And the man said, well, yes. And he said, well, how many? And he said, 1. I mean, he was more asking on this ship, And he said, well, 1. He said, well, who? You. I was like, me? What? And he said the man was so charmed that he sponsored the Swami's trip. Oh, he also was asking if he had any money. He didn't have any money. He had no money. He had enough money to get on the ship and come. That, you can say, is either absolute madness or it's perfect devotion. It's interesting because depending on which way the energy is running, it could be either one. It's just that devotion has this way of going uphill, whereas madness has this way of going downhill. And yet, seemingly, you go back into the Bible and you read the story of, who's the guy who ended up in the whale? Jonah, thank you. It was good. Jacob, Job, no, not neither one of those. Jonah. Well, he was supposed to go do a job. God had him signed up to go teach some people who really did not want to hear what he had to say. And he really didn't want to be bothered with it. So he just decided, I'm just not going to do that. And he gets, thrown off of a ship because he's aware that he's the cause of the storm and the whole ship is going to go down. So they throw him off. He gets swallowed up by a whale. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, how, where, what? And yet, devotion teaches you, shows you, guides you, says you're going right straight to the spot. We were recently in Gurgaon in India, which is the town. Gaon means town or village of the Guru. Guru Gram is the way they're trying to retitle it. And it's the town where Drona lived. Drona is the one who trained the Pandavas in the Mahabharata, of which the Bhagavad Gita is a small part. And Arjuna is one of those Pandavas. And they were all archers. They practiced archery. I used to visualize that they practiced archery on our street where we lived in Gurgaon. And they would aim at their targets. But the story, many of us have heard the story of the teacher training the students, training the archers. And he would ask them, what do you see? And they would say, oh, well, I see the sky and I see the trees, the wind is blowing a little bit, and I see the target, yes. And the teacher in Drona would say, well, go ahead and shoot. But he would sort of be saying under his breath, I know you're not going to hit the target. And they would shoot and they would miss, or they would sort of hit it but not really hit it. Well, this went on several times. It finally came to Arjuna. What do you see? I see the eye of the bird. The target was a bird, an image of a bird. Well, what else do you see? I see the eye of the bird. Shoot. So he shoots and he hits the eye of the bird. That is devotion. It's not that the rest of the world isn't busy going on. People are walking the streets of life. People are walking the streets of consciousness. They find their own level. But devotion sees that goal and says, I will have that. I will. I have it now. It's not off in the dim, distant future. It's not off in some other lifetime. It is right now. Devotion is always now. Habit, it's interesting because in the story of the Mahabharata, Drona fights on the wrong side. He fights on the side of the enemies of truth. And he represents habit. Drona trains all the good characters, he trains all the bad characters. Habit can go both ways. We can have wonderful habits, we can have terrible habits. But habit ultimately has to be defeated because habit cannot give us devotion. Habit can get us to the chair. Habit can get us to the ceremony. Habit can bring us to whatever the possibility is. But whatever we do in that moment is beyond habit. Devotion is never limited to a habit. We have to make devotion constant. And it becomes this wellspring of life, of love, of joy. Ultimately, it becomes a wellspring of freedom. And that, for each of us, is the blessing waiting for us, and it's our birthright. And we do have to go and claim it. It's not something that we can have given to us by somebody else. We can take the inspiration of others, and that's very valuable. That's very, very helpful. But ultimately, it comes to what do we practice in our daily life. Every one of us and every person in this world gets 24 good hours, or 23 hours and 50 however minutes it is, out of every day. We all get the same number of minutes every single day. It's just a question, what will we do with them? If we offer them to God, and it doesn't mean that it's just about sitting in a chair for meditation. It also means when you're washing the dishes, or when you're filling out your taxes, or when you're answering the telephone. It's all of those things. There's no part of it that's not spiritual. You're washing your arm. You're practicing the niyama cleanliness. Whatever it may be, it's all part of God's reality. But devotion allows us to offer it to God. And then it comes to life. Then it comes to joy and blessing. And that's when you see the image of saints who they're surrounded by light, or masters. They're surrounded by this glow of light. It's divine light. Why? Because it's like they are aflame. Their life is ignited. We all can be ignited. Devotion strikes the match. We'll take